So let's start, the student presentation. I know everybody's so excited to listen our, the student presentation, right? So before starting the student research presentation, I would like to introduce the moderator, Dr. Anna Ma. So Dr. Ma is Assistant Professor of Marketing, and she joined the WICS in 2019, and she is teaching Introduction to Marketing, Retailing, Consumer Behavior, and Marketing Research. So please welcome Dr. Ma.
Thank you, Hyun, for introducing me here, and thank you, Dr. Ken, Dr. Edikola, and Dr. Rexer, giving us such a motivating speech. I'm very happy to be here to actually share with you our very exciting students' research projects. So as you can see today here, we have 4 very exciting student projects, and actually from various disciplines. So we have projects from sports management, and we have projects from hospitality leadership and accounting. For the students, so we have 2 tracks for today's presentation, okay? So we have track 1, which is basically, research ideas. So in this track, students had the projects in very preliminary stage. So they're, happy to share their ideas to see how it's going. And in the track 2, which is research project. So in this part, the students project is a little bit more developed, so students may have some data collected or have more theoretical models being established. So it's more like complete project presentation. So if you're in the for the students, if you're presenting in the track 1, please you can see on the slides you will have 5 minutes presentation and plus 5 minutes Q&A. And if you're in the track 2, and we're having, you're having 7 to 10 minutes of the presentation and plus 5 minutes of Q&A. So I will encourage our audiences to leave your questions into the Q&A part. And after the student's presentation, if you have any questions, you can simply just unmute yourself. So anyone can hear. We're welcoming any of the questions. Okay, so that's it. And of course, like Hyun said, so in the award will be announced tomorrow. Okay, so as we have now, so we're going to actually let's speak of a little bit variety. So we're going to with the sequence of first track 1 and then track 2, and then back to track 1 and track 2 again. So we can have a little bit of variety of the presentation. So for the first presentation, I'm happy to introduce you with Carol Lee from the Sports Management with the paper have the title of the Underrepresentation of the Women in the Sports Leadership Position in the Collegiate Athletes Coaches. Okay, Caroline, are you ready?
Yes, I am.
Okay, you're anytime to share your screen with us and with your interesting, exciting project.
Can everybody see that?
It's loading. Yes, we can see that.
So like Dr. Ma said, I'm Carrie Lee Pierce. I'm a senior sports management major, and I had the opportunity to work together with Dr. Woojun Lee in developing this research idea, which explores the underrepresentation of women in sport leadership positions and collegiate athletics coaches. So when we want to discuss underrepresentation, we have to look at the issues that are in the NCAA today, and specifically the gender discrimination and the gender disparity within the NCAA. So as of today, only 42.6% of female athletics teams are led by female coaches, whereas 97% of men's teams are led by a male. So as you can see, there is definitely a gap there. More men are coaching women than there are women coaching women, which leads us into the history of the gender discrimination in sport. And when you talk gender discrimination in sport, you have to mention the Title IX governing body that was first implemented in 1972. Before Title IX was implemented, 90% of coaches of women's NCAA teams were female. But once NCAA implemented the Title IX rule, we actually saw the opposite effect than what was intended. So Title IX was intended to give more opportunity to women in sport, but after Title IX, we unfortunately saw men starting to take over the majority of coaching positions. This is due in large part to the fact that Title IX made coaching women's teams more lucrative and beneficial. This also brings us into limited experience and history with female coaches. So because of the limited head coaching positions, student athletes are less likely to have experiences with female head coaches, which leads to lesser attitudes on women in coaching positions. So the overall purpose of this study was to further examine and assess underrepresentation of women in sport leadership positions and collegiate athletic coaches, as well as the factors that may influence the underrepresentation. And throughout our research, we had hypothesized that student athletes that have had higher contact with female coaches are more likely to harbor positive attitudes towards female coaches, as well as more likely to support hiring female head coaches. And just a little bit of extra background, this study is near and dear to my heart. This is a topic I have been very insistent on wanting to work on since I was a freshman in college. One of my very first research papers for an English class was on gender disparity in sport. And following my graduation at the end of May, I will be starting my college coaching career as a graduate assistant. So this is an industry that I will be entering, and this is something I really wanted to examine. So we want to look first into factors that influence underrepresentation. I highlighted 4 specific ones here, but obviously there are plenty more to be talked about. These are the 4 that I wanted to touch on and that I touched on in my paper. So the first is leadership qualities. Typically in prior research projects, specifically from Dr. Virginia Sheen in 1973, common qualities of men were more commonly associated with the ideal qualities for middle managers and leaders in business. And then in a 1989 revisited study, men still held those perceptions of leadership qualities, whereas women were starting to move away from those harmful perceptions and stereotypes that associate men with leaders instead of women with leaders. The second factor is job type. Coaching at the NCAA level is very time consuming. You work very long days and you have extensive travel, especially as you move in division. Once you get to Division I, you'll be traveling for weeks at a time on road trips, which means you'll be away from family. So that brings in concerns of familial commitment and then commitment to team as well. And women are more likely than men to have to make the decision between team and family. The third factor is sexuality. So unfortunately, sexual attraction is brought up when discussing women coaching men, but is rarely, if ever, brought up when discussing men coaching women. And those stereotypes are very harmful towards women in any job industry, but especially in one that is so dominated by males as the sport industry is. And then the fourth is job attitude. Women in coaching do end up having a less positive attitude towards the coaching career than male counterparts do, which can be factored by these factors that also influence underrepresentation, as well as things that we'll discuss in the next 2 slides, like athlete perception and contact hypothesis. I want to say that it is worth noting, one factor that does not show up that influence underrepresentation is experience. Women actually have been measured to have more human capital, which means they have had more experience playing the sport, as well as more experience with playing honors than male coaches have in the coaching industry. Again, I wanted to touch on athlete perception. So prior research from Magnuson and Rhea in 2009 had shown that collegiate male athletes actually preferred male coaches, whereas women athletes had little to no preference. And the male athletes that were cited in this paper had reasonings that included that a woman's presence would make it hard to concentrate, or the athletes would not be able to take it when she corrected their form, or that a female coach would be less likely to motivate and encourage than a male coach would. And when I first read that, I was very taken aback because I'm a female athlete myself. I have been coached by males and women's, and I have never seen a difference between the ability to motivate an athlete between a male and a woman coach. And then finally, we talked on contact hypothesis, which works hand in hand with the overall hypotheses that we had for this project. And contact hypothesis was developed by Gordon Allport originally in 1954, which hypothesized that intergroup contact could foster better and more positive attitudes and perceptions on people outside of their group. So in this case, the 2 groups would be male and female, and contact would be prior experience with female coaches. So unfortunately, this was a research idea, so we did not get to perform any specific research and data collection, but we did develop a method that we hope to expand upon in the future. And that is that student athletes will be asked to complete questionnaires, which will measure 3 different things. The first will be contact experience with female head coaches. The second will be their perceptions of female coaching competency. And the third will be the attitude towards having female coaches in both men and women's teams. And that final, that third measurement will be developed independently by me and Dr. Lee, which will be hopefully a single measure questionnaire, just to measure the attitudes. And then through selected research method and further consultation with Gordon Allport's theory, we would expect to find that student athletes' perception on competence, ability, and performance of female coaches will be greater if they had had prior contact with a female coach. And given those results, we would be able to argue that having more female head coaches and athletic programs will have positive effects on student athletes' perceptions of female head coaches, competence, as well as the willingness to have female head coaches hired in collegiate athletic programs. And here's just a reference paper, a reference page. The highlighted references are ones that I specifically referenced in this PowerPoint presentation, and the others are ones that were included in my paper. Thank you all. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. After the symposium, if anybody has any extra questions, there's the contact information for both me and Dr. Lee.